Let's open with a word of prayer. Holy God, we want to thank you. As you have invited us to attend these holy convocations, we now want to invite you into our presence. We pray that you would guide us and direct us through these next few days. Whether we are here in person or listening online, may each of us individually, and may I, on behalf of everybody corporately, dedicate ourselves to you. Each of us has issues and difficulties in our lives. Health, financial, emotional. I pray you give each of us the ability to lay those things aside so that we might receive the blessing that you desire to give to us. In Jesus' name, amen. For several months now, we've been speaking about the subject of relationships. Specifically, the issue of the breakdown of relationships, specifically adultery. And as you know, the pretext for having that conversation was the prophetic model of Revelation 17. I know that there are still questions in the minds of people over this subject. And as you know, we've just begun an initiative to disseminate this son-in-law study through the movement. Basically, it's going to be a repeat of what was done last year. It's not only the duty of the teachers to try to explain this, that this being the subject of adultery and relationships at a prophetic level, each of you individually have a responsibility to ask questions and understand this subject. There are still questions to be asked and issues to be settled. And often it's questions that we haven't thought about that bring new meaning and new information to these studies. So both I and the other teachers have received questions and comments over the weeks. Specifically for those of us here in Australia at this camp meeting, it's your opportunity to ask questions. So I want to address this I'll address it in a quick fashion, even though it's not a straightforward subject. So if you turn to Revelation 17 for a moment. So what I'm about to explain isn't something new. And we have spoken about it in open meetings publicly. But if there's one person, there's likely to be more people if they don't understand something. So in verse 2, it says, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication. And the person that they've committed fornication with is identified in verse 1, a prostitute. So hopefully everybody's okay with that setup, that dynamic. So I got a question recently that went something along these lines. I thought that the end of the world, the dispensation in which we're living, that there's this relationship between, I'm going to call it a singular king and a woman. We might think king of the north, this leader. But in the verse it says kings plural, so the person didn't understand that. So I just want to go over this point again. But before we do that, maybe someone here has some thoughts on that person's question. How would you respond to this person? If I can say it respectfully, how do we help them navigate through the mistake that they have made? They've made a mistake in their thinking. We don't have a roving mic, but if you just put your hands up and I'll repeat your questions or your comments.
Might it be just a panoramic view of the story? So it's kings across time.
So Catherine has said, maybe it's the panoramic view. So I guess I'm guilty of this. I've introduced this concept of, I've used the phrase panoramic view and dispensational view. You problem with your answer yet, Catherine? So, are you going to translate that or not? What I just said, ask Catherine the question. I'm speaking to my translator. So I asked the question, are you going to, I didn't hear you translate it. I'm on Portuguese, by the way. Sorry, it didn't come through. I was still waiting for you to translate. Okay, no problem. So, verse 1. No, verse 3. Verse 3. So he carried me away into the wilderness. And I saw a beast that was scarlet or red. The woman was scarlet as well. So does that sound like a panoramic view or a dispensational view? So Catherine can see that it's a dispensational view. So I want us to see that want us to understand it's not that straightforward sometimes to see when it's a panoramic concept or a dispensational one. Or with Catherine?
I still feel like it doesn't disqualify verse 2 from speaking about the woman having committed fornication with lots of kings over time.
So Catherine said, what I've just explained doesn't negate that this could be a panoramic view. So, first questioner said, we're at the end of the world and there's all these kings. And Catherine's response was, that's because this is a panoramic model, not a dispensational one. That's why there's lots of kings. So now we've got two questions to deal with. Anybody want to say something?
I agree with that because
oh, 1 second. So you agree with that? One second. I've got to let the translator finish, so you keep eye contact with me. Tell me what you agree with. Okay, now look at me, then you'll know when to speak. Okay, so the person just said it's a panoramic view because it's speaking about kings that have done something in the past. If they've done something in the past, there must be a present and a future. Doesn't that sound like dispensations? Not panoramic. Because you can't say the past and make that a panoramic view. Because the definition of past means it's no longer here. Agree? If you're going to do this, then it's not a past view. Anyone else? I know that hasn't helped yet, but hopefully we'll tie it up. Did you put your hand up, Terry? Oh, Terry.
It's highlighting the Fifth Kingdom and 1798.
So Elder Terry said it's so this is answering directly the first questioner's person who'd asked me this in the past. That this isn't about our history, it's about the past. And specifically the history of, we could call it the Dark Ages, the 1260, or the Fifth Kingdom. So to the first question, these kings are long dead. These are kings that were in the past. So I'm guessing that some of us still are not sure about that yet. Give me a second. So, have we answered the question, Josephine, about that it's not panoramic, not dispensational yet? Or we have? But yeah. So I'll take that as a no, that you're still not sure. Okay. Catherine? Still not yet? So,
Instead of this, like, what would
so Catherine's got a question. If it was the panoramic model, what would the words look like? How would it be? How would it have been written if it was a panoramic view? So before we address that, if Josephine still isn't sure yet, then that means that she's almost in the same place as the original questioner. Because these kings could equally be modern day kings as well as historical kings. It's all the kings of all ages. And therefore, that verse could be talking about us. So even though you didn't intend to do it, you end up getting onto the same ground as the original questioner. Let's try and answer Catherine's question. What words would you use if it was panoramic? What would you say? Molly?
Let's take off the wilderness.
So Molly said, subtract some words, not add anything or change anything. And his suggestion was, erase the word wilderness and it all becomes panoramic. And then you'd have to erase scarlet. Yep. And let's see a couple more things you'd have to erase. The blood of the saints, you'd have to erase that. Unless you're anticipating that she's red today and drinks a lot of blood. And it's the blood of whom? Saints. So you'd have to get rid of saints as well. Unless you think tomorrow a lot of saints are going to start being killed. And there aren't that many of us left. So you have to take a lot of stuff out, but Cassie wants to know what you put in. So this is a problem when someone stands up and teaches and talks about these different concepts. It all sounds really good. So you start thinking about it and then you realize, actually, it's not that straightforward. James.
If you want to make it sound like a panoramic, you can go to verse 9 and 10.
So he said, if you want to make it panoramic, you go to verse 9 and 10. That's it.
Yeah, so if you want to make it read like panoramic, if I understood the question.
So he said his answer would be verses 9 and 10. And how would you introduce the chapter panoramically?
Didn't think that far.
Because that's a question.
Yeah.
How'd you start off doing it? So I'm not saying I know the answer unless someone else has got any thoughts, but I'll share my thoughts on it. No, I won't share my thoughts. Brendan will share his first. Okay. So my answer to your question is that you wouldn't. You wouldn't give a panoramic view at all. When you do line upon line, here a little, there a little. Oh, here a little, there a little. Sorry. And we take histories upon histories. Catherine, do you agree we are avoiding deliberately looking at panoramic views?
When we do that.
We say we want to study line upon line, we're deliberately shutting ourselves away from panoramic views. And why would we do that?
Comparing the dispensation with the dispensation.
So Catherine said, because we're comparing the dispensation with the dispensation. So I rephrase my question. When I say why would we do that? I didn't mean why would we go to the dispensational one. I'm saying why would we not go to a panoramic one? So I'll take the answers, but I'll give my answer. You'd be up the creek without paddle if you did that. Okay. So the starting point would be the information would be too vague. So I'll take that and rephrase it. I'll repackage it. So this is our dispensational, this is our panoramic view. How many lines can we have? Just one line. Because it's one story. One history. So to make this panoramic, what's the difference between the beginning and the end? So the question is the difference between alpha and omega.
No.
No difference. Okay, so what's the difference between alpha and omega and this midpoint? No difference. So if you have panoramic views, you end up creating entropy, which means you can't find additional information. There's no new information to be had. So all I'll do is I'll just keep on adding waymarks to this. So surely that would help. And the problem is it doesn't. Because if it's panoramic, every single waymark must what? Catherine already knows the answer. They must be the same. The woman. Can the woman get older? Panoramically speaking. So if she was young at the beginning and then old at the end, that's two people. So you couldn't sort of say, oh, I lost my arm. Or he broke my heart. There can't be any story if it's panoramic. So to answer your question is, it could never have been portrayed or written panoramically. It has to be a dispensational view. So I'm not going to ask if that helped. I'm just going to say I hoped it helped, Josephine and Catherine. Gloria.
What is the function of panoramic view?
So what's the function of the panoramic view? If you can't portray it. What I mean by that is it makes things worse if you portray it panoramically. So this is what I'm going to say what Graham alluded to a little bit ago. We'll go back to alpha and omega. So if this is dispensational, what do we know about the beginning and the end if it's dispensational? D1, D2. They're different. They are not the same. By definition, they're not the same. So this is a dispensational view. So what does the panoramic view bring to the table then? Before we answer that, what we want to say is that this is real life. If this was 2,000 years or 20 years, D1 and D2 would be different. And the 2,000 years just makes the difference bigger. It's worse. So what does a panoramic model bring to us? Brendan.
Baseline principle.
Baseline principle. What does that mean? 1 second.
It's core core principle.
I'm going to need more than that. I'm not sure what you're speaking about when you say it. What was the it?
Subject. Say D2, you're looking at D2. You want to understand what that is. So you analyze that to its core principle of what it actually is instead of.
Okay. So Brendan said that you look at D2 and you try to understand it properly. Catherine?
Your template.
So Catherine's used the word template. Maria? No.
I'm not sure if I got the question right. But you asked panoramic.
Panoramic.
Has been.
So Marie says, like paraphrasing from a Bible verse, what has been will be. Yeah, Brent?
It's like what Brian said, you've got to break D1 and D2 down to a principle that works for both. So it's bang.
Okay, so now you got it. So what you have to do is, we know that these are dispensations, which means 1 and 2 are different. We'd call that a line of progression. But if we have a panoramic view, then what we're bringing to this model that we're looking at or that we've created I'll say not identical, but similar. And in our movement, we're focused so much on this idea of similar that we've turned similar into identical. Which means that the end is identical to the beginning. And because we're intelligent, we know that's not really identical, but it's so similar, it's the same. Without a panoramic anchor, you can't tie alpha and omega together. And what Marie just said, what has been will come to pass, or I think she may have said the other way around, is just a repackaging of a panoramic model. So Revelation 17, it begins with a dispensational view and it ends with a dispensational view. And as James took us to verses 9 and 10, it's not just there, but sprinkled quite liberally throughout the chapter are these panoramic concepts. You see it in verse 3 when it speaks about she sits on 7 heads and 10 horns. Because that's the panoramic bit. And what kind of heads are they? Good heads or bad heads? Good heads? So, Molly, is the 7th head a good one? No. So they're not all good. You agree? You don't agree with? Okay. So it can't tell you the condition of a head to be panoramic. Because you're going to go bad, good, bad. To keep it panoramic, it's forced to just say heads. But that in and of itself doesn't do much for us. Okay. Have I answered your question, Catherine? No. Rephrase your question.
Is it not possible to have an introduction and then from verse 3 onwards to have a dispensation?
So Catherine says, why can't these crazy writers like God do things sensibly in some kind of order? And we all know the answer, because God's got a sense of humor. God's going to package it in a way just to make it hard. It'd be too easy if we did that. Just let you know, in the original, it's even worse because there's no verses or anything. Some clever people have broken this down into verses to make it, easier. So we don't know why God would order it this way, but God deems fit to do it so. But I don't think you can explain things to the necessary depth in a panoramic view. I guess that's what I thought your question was. Now think about it from God's perspective. So I'm guessing then, perhaps neither of you still agree, that's Josephine and Catherine, that this is talking about the 1260. The chapter is going to be introduced to 1260 as the 1260. You agree with that? So that means it can't be a panoramic view. Those kings have to be dispensational.
Can I talk about chapter 13?
Sorry?
Can I talk about chapter 13, where we get a picture at the beginning and then
So Catherine wants to go to chapter 13, but before we go there, okay, you take us to where you want to go.
so in chapter 13, verse 1, we get a panoramic picture, but I don't think chapter 13 is, like I understand it's going to take us to a dispensational view.
So chapter 13 takes us to a dispensational view. And chapter 17 doesn't.
Yes, it does. So, does it help if I paraphrase what I'm thinking?
Yeah.
It's saying, let me tell you about this entity that's been like this all throughout time, and now we'll go to the wilderness.
So Catherine says, God says to John, let me show you this woman. You called her an entity, but it's a woman. And I'm going to show you what happens to her.
What happened in the past?
I don't know if it's past or present. It just says, I'll show you judgment of her. So I don't know if that's past or present. It just says, I'm going to show you what's going to. In verse 2, it just says, the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her. And is verse 1 and 2, you think, what you say 1 and 2 is panoramic?
I think 1 is dispensational. I think 2 could just be a general statement about the panoramic.
So 1 is dispensational and 2 is panoramic. And 3 is what?
Dispensational.
Dispensational. In verses 1 and 2, which one comes first? Does verse 1 happen first or verse 2 happen first?
Because I've said it's panoramic for verse 2, it's not the first or last. It's
So you're saying verse 2 isn't even in any order. So in verse 1, when this woman is being judged, and I'm going to suggest that judgment is what's the legal term? It's not like investigative bit of it. It's the executive. This is the executive judgment. Yeah. I'm going to change that. I'm going to show you the punishment of the woman. So if 2 is panoramic, is 2 happening at the time she's being punished? Or before? So Catherine says before. So there's a sequence. So 2 comes before 1. What's she being punished for? It's not for killing saints, by the way. For fornication. That's what she's being punished for. Whatever the fornication is or means, she's being punished for doing that. So number 2 has to be dispensational. All good? Okay. So we've addressed several points. That these introductory verses are in fact dispensational. You have to view things dispensationally to extract information. Because if this woman's just sitting on 7 heads, she's sitting on 7 heads at the beginning, in the middle, and at the end. Do you agree with that? So I'm living at the end of the world, and I'm looking at the woman, and what's she sitting on? 7 heads. Go back 4,000 years. And what's she doing now? The same. In fact, it's so much the same, it's identical. So now we have no... And what kind of heads is she sitting on? What kind of heads at the beginning and at the end?
Bad.
So Catherine said bad. And I'm just going to say... Oh. So Brendan says he doesn't know. Josephine? Josephine said it could be good, could be bad. Gloria?
Good. Versus the beast.
So Gloria has taken up some study and said, now we're going to talk about heads and beasts. But Gloria's picking up an idea that comes hundreds of hours after this initial place that we're at. We're at the beginning of our investigation, and you don't know that yet. So all we know about the heads are that they're the same. When you're at the beginning and at the end, the picture is identical. And as you go all the way through the thousands of histories, or the 7 histories, the heads always look the same. Now later on, as Gloria has just advised us, we will discover that some are good and some are bad. Good heads and bad heads. And as soon as you do that, you don't have a panoramic view. Brendan. Oh.
The only way to know if it's good or bad is if you zoom into a dispensation.
So Brendan said the only way you can identify if it's good or bad is to come out of a panoramic view and go into a dispensational view.
Did you answer what was the function of a panoramic view?
I did answer. The question is, did I answer what the function of a panoramic view is? And I did answer that, but I'll do it again. When I have two dispensations, one at the beginning and one at the end, I have a story. So maybe we'll do an example. So this is a line. And if this is a line of agriculture, not how you spell it, but I'll leave it. What do you end up with? Harvest. What do you start with? Just before ploughing. Weeds or a wilderness, a fallow field. I'm just going to put empty. So this is something we've spoken about a lot. Another one we do is you start off as a sinner. And you end up as a saint. The agricultural model, 7 steps of salvation. So is this dispensational or panoramic? They're all looking at you. I'm looking at you. Got dispensational. That's Molly. No? This is panoramic. So we've got panoramic and dispensational. So if it was panoramic and I was at the beginning, I take a picture. And then I jump to the end and I take a picture. If it was panoramic, shouldn't they look the same? John said yes, and Josephine says, yeah, I get it now. Worse, you're at the beginning and you have the ability to look into the future. And as you look, you see this field go through these seasons constantly changing. And if this is the ground, it's not a line. When you look, you see the growth of something. The plant. So as you look into the future, it constantly keeps on changing. Only one season, yes. Thank you for that correction. It's only one season. So it's not a panoramic view that we discussed there. Everybody okay so far? Ish. So going back to the original question. And part of the second one. Every sensible person would give a good introduction. Except God. So why? Why focus on that? Who's this woman? The woman of verse 1, the prostitute. In real life, who is that? Or with the papacy? So it's a papacy. Who wrote this book? John. So for John, is the papacy past, present, or future? John?
Future when he wrote it.
So John's alive. We'll call this. You can call it 100. You can call it 30 or 70, whichever you want to go for. So I'll stop there. So people have said that the papacy is in the future. Except Graham. He saw the trap I was leading you all into.
I'm going to quote someone else.
Go ahead.
The man of sin authority.
So Graham is going to quote Paul, John's best friend, because Paul told John that the papacy is already here. Might look a bit different. All John's talking about here is the great grandson, child, of the person that's around when Paul identifies the character. So the reason why all of these things start at this time frame, not at the end where you might think it should, or panoramically, is because who is every single writer speaking to? Give you a clue, it's not us. Their own dispensation, their own people. So if Paul said he's already here in embryonic form, John's going to say to all of their friends, I'll show you what. Paul will show you the beginning. I'll show you the end of that same person, that same entity. And historically speaking, we'll go with kingdoms or whatever. Who's in power when Paul said that? Rome. We might call it pagan Rome. And the end of this story, if I can say, when you get to Revelation 17, who's in power then? No, we know John wrote it. It's pagan Rome, we know that. When this is happening, 1, 2, 3, 4. Revelation 1, 2, 3, 4. So Revelation 17 verses 1 through 3, 4. Who's ruling there? Papacy? So Brendan said the papacy. It's definitely not the papacy. The only people who rule are kings. So we've got kings of Europe. So we like to call them the kings of Europe. If you go to Daniel 2, what number is it? What kingdom number? 5, you said. Can you name 5 in Daniel 2? So when he said the toes, number 5. What are the toes made of? Iron. And what number is iron? 4. So you know when John's writing about this end, same kingdom. Still pagan Rome, but we don't like to call it pagan Rome. We want to call it something else. And that's why it begins here. Because John is telling a story that spans centuries. Speaking to people who all they know is Rome. So what's John telling them then? This embryonic problem, which is your church neighbor whom Rome doesn't even know exists is predicted to become so powerful that it will control this empire that you see in front of you. Perhaps that's why it's introduced that way. Because it's so significant. If I were God, I would have kept the sequence in the chapter the same, but I would have perhaps made this chapter 1 or something like that. For definite, I'd make this chapter 13. Then chapter 13 would be 14 and 14 would be 15 because it's out of sequence. Because chapter 12 would give you literally from the birth of Christ, and it shows you this Roman Empire. And then chapter 17 is going to tell you what happens to this bad actor because of what they've done to Rome. Okay, so I'll take a couple of questions, but so I don't forget. To the original questioner, just repeating what Elder Terry told us. And I think John has also said the same. And this story in verse 2 is not our history. It's the history that we call the Fifth Kingdom, which I'm saying is pagan Rome gone funny. And then what John will do, he'll take all of that literal history, because it's just one story of 2,000 years of history, just one empire. And he'll just explain the last little bit at the end. Which we call 6 and 7. And 6 is its own story. But it shows you how you go from pagan Rome. So it shows you how you go from pagan Rome Can you hear me okay? Can anyone hear me?
Yes,
Okay, so
audio is
people
okay.
can hear me. Is the problem at my translator's end or my end? Okay, so it takes you from pagan Rome which is we could call a European problem, to a worldwide phenomena. That it becomes a much bigger issue. And I think that's why it begins this way. So we're going to take the dispensational view of verse 2. And we're going to understand that there's a panoramic constancy or a panoramic story. And then take that fifth and superimpose it at the end of the world to see what it would look like then. One last question or comment from Gloria, and then we'll close.
So it's going from pagan Rome to pagan Rome Caesars, right? In one presentation in
So pagan Rome is a complicated kingdom because it spans so much history. The only constancy it has is it's all centered in Europe. So it morphs through history. So having said that, can you repeat what your question is or your comments?
Or being pagan Rome and fifth also pagan Rome, not people.
So the fourth and the fifth kingdom are both pagan Rome. Sometimes we might call it, if I just say pagan Rome, the Caesars. And phase two, we might call the Byzantine or Byzantine Empire. And then after that, the history gets complicated. That you get this fragmentation happening in Europe, and you have all these individual countries. But Daniel 2 gives us this constancy that it's still iron all the way through. So it's fine, as John said, to see these kings are European kings, European nations. But what's important to understand is that what happened in Europe in the past will happen across the world at the end. Okay, so I hope that helped answer people's questions online, and I hope it helped some of you here. Let's close with prayer. Holy God, we want to thank you. I want to thank you for giving me the privilege of being in this movement, to be the center of the great controversy, and to try to put the pieces of the puzzle together. To not only understand the truth, but more importantly, to experience the truth. And to be influenced by its transformative power. May the truth that we hold on to truly set us free from the bondage of sin. of sin and of ignorance. In Jesus' name, in the name of Jesus, amen.